Hello and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. And Pat, this past weekend here we had an old-time hockey game as you describe it, and it sure was. Fighting is down around the league, but we certainly were treated to a nice scrap in what was a retribution game after the Wayne Simmonds hit on Ryan McDonagh. Pat, I know fighting is down and we don't see these kind of things that used to be very commonplace in the game. But what do you make of this kind of retribution fight that happened in the game between the Flyers and the Rangers?
It was interesting because you don't really, we don't get a lot of this anymore, like you said, and it's weird because, there's so much made, McDonagh obviously hasn't played since he was concussed by Simmonds with a left cross, basically. And the Rangers, that's their captain, and they needed to stick up for him. And Dylan McIlrath did stick up for him. And then you get the fight with Simmonds and McIlrath, and then you get the fight with Ryan White and Tanner Glass. And it was like, this is pretty, this is kind of crazy. It's almost, the irony is that, it was rival. The Rangers play on rivalry night a lot, and the Flyers play on rivalry night a lot, and yet, you don't think of, these two teams didn't play together on rivalry night at all this year because for whatever reason, and yet here they are, rivals with fights, and these are the type of, things that rivalry nights are made out of, and true rivalries are made of. You'll be talking about this down the road with the Simmonds and McDonagh thing. You also see why the sport has evolved away from that because the Flyers lost a top line player. I mean, Simmonds is as tough as they come, don't get me wrong. And, he toes the line of dirty sometimes, and he's a good player. There's no doubt about it. But you get these tough, skilled players, the old Gordie Howe hat trick type deal where it was a goal assist in a fight, right? But, you can't lose these players for 5 minutes, especially when you're playing against, teams that are as skilled or more skilled, especially the Flyers' sake, because they're chasing every point they can. They lost, they had a big chance to make up points this weekend, and got 1 out of 4 in a couple 4-point games. So it's weird because as much as you got to commend the teams for doing it, and you got to commend the Flyers for and Simmonds for taking his medicine. But they lost him, and they lost the war. I say, I write it. They lost the battle, in terms of the whole Simmonds thing, and then they lost the war, which was the game, and it almost set the tone for a big emotional Ranger win, which left the Flyers. What are they now? They're 5 points out of the last playoff spot or something about that, right?
Yeah, it's interesting looking at this in terms of not only the rivalry and the fact that these two teams certainly share a common hatred that other teams across the league have for each other in various situations, and what that leads to. But I also think that we see now fighting being a different thing, that we talk, like, for example, 10 years ago, would we really have been talking about this? Probably not, because it's just more commonplace. I mean, how many fights were we seeing on any given night, across the league where, all right, a fight was a fight. Sure, we might have talked about it just because of what happened to McDonagh there, but really, now we're in a spot where fighting is much less commonplace, and I think that's a good thing. The point is that it's like you can't, as you alluded to with Simmonds being not available for them for 5 minutes, obviously, as a result of the penalty. You can't afford to lose guys like that, who could be fighters, and also teams can't carry a fighter anymore.
Yeah.
It's not like there's extra bench spots where you could roll, 13, 14 forwards. That's obviously not the case. You can't have your fourth line be made up with someone who can't skate and all they can do is fight. I mean, it's not that league anymore. Even the guys around the league now who do fight are much more skilled than their counterparts from the 90s, say, or even way back before that. And I think it's a good thing. Sure, I'm never going to be against fighting because I've heard too many players, even in a personal interview with a former enforcer, Ken Belanger, when I used to produce his podcast for him. he's much like a lot of other people thinks that's a safety valve. That fighting is made so that when the pressure cooker of the game happens, the fighting takes the lid off of it before it explodes.
Yeah.
And I agree with that because enough players have said that, and certainly they're the ones on the ice. They know what happens, in between the lines. I'm never going to say that it should go away, but I think the game is at a good place now with it being something that's much less frequently occurring, and it seems like at least it's not getting worse at least. So again, I like where the game is at with this.
Yeah, I agree with you there. In terms of, it's interesting though to see these, the fights. Whether it's sometimes it's about getting your guys up in a day game, or whether it's, I mean that wasn't a fight, but that whole skirmish with Simmons and McDonough earlier the week before was something that was kind of, it was a 1:00 game, and it kind of, it brought a lot of attention to the game. And it's weird though, because how, we've talked about it before, how the sport gets covered. Everybody says, well, it's the only one where fighting is legal. Well, it's as true as that is, there's fighting and all sorts. We've seen melees and skirmishes and outbreaks and moments like that. And it's interesting because, like you said, you saw the fight with McElrath and then the fight, and then the whole thing was over with. There was not any running of Simmons. There was not any running of Giroux or Dvorak. There was not anything dirty. It's just, Simmons stepped up, took his medicine, and whether that's the right thing or not, it doesn't matter for my money right now, because that's just the way it is. But like you, I agree with you that you kind of get moving away from that goonish kind of culture where that's all you have, because the salary cap has kind of mandated that you need to have, you can only have a certain number of players at a certain number of dollars, and the skill level, like you said, is so spread out, and also the schedule is a big part of it. Like you said, you need your fourth line to play at least 10 minutes a night most nights, and they, that's a good thing that you get some more, plus more skilled fourth liners means a better game. You're not have these guys slogging it up. You don't have the people still pay to see fights though, in some capacity. Yes. Even though they don't see them every night, you see the reaction when there is one in a game. And I was talking with somebody, I forget who it was last year, or I think it was last year, or in terms of the shootout. But it's like, how many times do you see fans get out of their seats for a game? All of them. They get out of their seats for goals. They get out of their seats for the shootout, which is interesting, and also for fights. So, as much as we don't want it to be part of the game, as much as limit it as a part of the game, it still is an entertainment value, the violence portion. And it did do a good job with McElrath and Simmons, and then you get the two heavyweights with White and Glass, dropping them shortly thereafter, and then the fans to some degree saw blood, and there was a lot of talked about the Flyers and Rangers game, in terms of retribution, in terms of trying to kind of overcome that thing. So like I said, I'm not necessarily ecstatic about it as a part of the game, but it is. So, but it was a wild first period over there at MSG.
It certainly was. I don't know the answer to this, but I have to look it up. Have we had a goalie fight this year?
Oh, I think we have. I feel like we have, but I don't remember. But
I know there was a couple last year. Actually, the one I can remember that was relatively recently was, I guess it was Ray Emery when he was back in Philly against Holtby. Yeah, that was 2 years ago. That was a great one. I mean, Holtby with the long hair flying everywhere.
It also was, funny fact about that, it also netted Ray Emery the third star in that game in a 7-0 loss. Well, if you go back and look at the box score, I'm kidding. I looked back at it recently, actually, but Emery and Holtby fought 2 years ago in Philly, and it netted Emery the third star in a 7-0 loss.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think we've had a couple.
Didn't Quick and Crawford almost go in the playoffs 2 years ago?
We had a couple near ones, but that's always the most. Those are the most fun. But they get to those guys got in the playoffs. They got a little close to dropping them, but there's a headbutt, I guess. But yeah, what? Those are really the best. You want to get the fans out of the seats, get the goalies involved.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see too many more of those, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, with fighting going away, I think it's going to be few and far between.
We'll just have to enjoy them when we do get to see them.
Yes, but speaking of someone who was around when fighting was definitely prevalent, and now he's still around, even without fighting, Jaromir Jagr turns 44 years old. Jagr, the ageless wonder. If you got to see his birthday cake, it was pretty cool. It was a half Czech jersey. The other half was Florida Panthers. I guess I could have tried to add a piece from every uniform, but that would have probably been way too annoying because he's played for so many teams.
Yeah.
But look, he's going to be in the playoffs. He certainly means a lot to this team, not only in terms of offensive production, but helping these young kids down in the kittens, as some people call them, in Florida right now. It's amazing, just the fact that he's this age now. Pat, what more can you say? I mean, happy birthday to him. He's a treasure for the game. I hope he plays till he's 50.
We'll keep this short and sweet because we talk a lot about him on here, but it's amazing. I think what I'd really like to say about him is just how remarkable his career is, because you think about, he still, I think, gets booed and he used to get booed in Pittsburgh because of how his tenure ended there, and he was such the young superstar Eastern European. He was almost like ushered in that era where they were the high flying Eastern European player who could attract supermodels and be this perceived as selfish almost. And yet, to me, what's most remarkable is how he's evolved almost from that player, or what he's evolved, or that perception has evolved into this, the hardest working, goofy, fun loving, prankster who's like, it's almost like watching a young person evolve into a parent. I mean, I don't think he's any of that, but when you look at what he's done and how the perception of him has evolved from whether it's press, whether it's media, whether it's fans, whether everyone kind of views him as the grandpa type deal, and everyone kind of loves the guy at this point. Whereas he used to get booed in rinks, and he was public enemy number one when he was superstar, and now just because whatever reason, but these last few years here, he's kind of evolved into this great elder statesman for the game, and I can't say enough good things about Jagr, and no matter what the circumstances are, I guess since he came back from the KHL, everyone's kind of more appreciative of him because they realize what they had when they didn't have him for those 3 years or so. And he's a treasure, and he's a great player, and he's on pace for almost 60 points this season. And like you said, I hope he plays till he's 50, because he said he wants to, but he's doing a lot of good down there in Florida, and he's semi-retired anyway to be in Sunrise. It's good for him, right?
Yeah. And if you remember a little bit of the offseason from him, he's still doing well in other departments too. So power to him. Not much more we can say about that. So something that's not as good. Mike Yeo, this was probably 3 years in the making almost, if you want to say it. Even from the start, it would just never was really going to happen.
It's amazing how many times he cheated death.
I know. I mean, I guess he must be a cat and he ran out of lives finally.
Yeah.
Mike Yeo gets the axe in Minnesota, probably deservingly so, or at least they had to make the move just because the team was struggling so much. Minnesota is in big trouble here because they have so much money locked up with guys.
Yeah.
Parise and Suter. Then they have Pominville and Vanek, guys who are supposed to be big time players that are not doing so.
Yeah, Vanek was a healthy scratch last week.
Yeah, I mean Matt Dumba has been a really good addition. He's a young guy who's come in the last couple of years and been really good. But outside of that, there's a lot of underachieving players on this team. And they expected to be vying for a title at some point, and they're nowhere near that. Even if they sneak in, I mean, being an 8 seed is a wild card. That's not what they envisioned with this. That's not what they spent the money for. I would think you really have to, at this point, barring some sort of crazy playoff run, even this year, the whole experiment of buying these two players to bring them home, it's been a failure.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting because if you think about it, this is a team that was on the rise. They had the deal with Niederreiter from the Islanders, and he's still a pretty young player. He's only 23 years old, and you have some young players. You have Jason Zucker, and you mentioned Matt Dumba, who's still pretty young, and Coyle. But I saw a stat. I think my friend Adam Gretz from CBS tweeted this out that the Wild have the most money committed to any players 31 and older in the league than any other team in the NHL. And it's a big you alluded to it a little bit, that Thomas Vanek's got 15 goals in 55 games. And or that, Zach Parise, only is a minus 10 and 33 points. These are guys who, they're paying him a lot of money. And Jason Pominville, 6 goals. You got, it's unacceptable. So, these guys, like you said, they're in one of those weird, unique spots where, and it's interesting though, because they're in a spot where they expect to be good enough to compete for a championship, and they're paying money like they should be in it to compete for a championship. And yet, they're not, like you said, they're not close, and it's not so much necessarily that their skill isn't there if they were performing. It's that there's always the Blackhawks and Kings to get past, and they haven't gotten past the Blackhawks.
No. And here's the thing with the Wild, though. If you think about it in terms of
that year, the lockout.
I lost you for a little bit there, Pat. I thought you had stopped.
No, I did. I was still going. What you have?
Oh yeah, I lost you for a good 15 seconds. Then hold on, let me
shoot. Okay.
All right. So I think the last thing I heard from you was they hadn't gotten past the Blackhawks and the Kings.
Okay.
Go for it.
And they've been knocked out by the Blackhawks 3 years in a row in the playoffs. There's no shame in losing to the Blackhawks. A lot of teams have done it, but. Even if they could avoid the Blackhawks, even if somehow, some team picked off Chicago and they managed to get into that, whatever, Central Division final or the second round, whatever it is, this team is not, ask the Blues. They're not a championship caliber team, but they're a lot better than the Wild are right now. And there's a lot of the Western Conference teams that could probably make that. It's just roster talented for sure, but, there's a lot of money there, and they just are not ever going to come out of the Western Conference as built now. So, and then, this whole experiment proves that, right? Because, they've had, they had the first year of the lockout, when they got to the playoffs, they're happy to be there. And then the year after, they won the playoff round and lost. And then they kind of, they got bit by some poor luck. But last year was really kind of that year to make the statement, and they didn't. And now, they've kind of regressed here. And there's a lot of young players up and coming here. We mentioned Granlund and Coyle and those types, but the window is quickly closing for the Wild, and they've got to do something here to get back on track. And that whole thing, you can't fire the team, so you fire the coach. And like you said, they've kind of good for Mike Yeo for cheating death each of the last couple of years, mm-hmm. but it just it was bound to happen with this roster as constructed, and you just wonder if Chuck Fletcher is going to be next.
Yeah, let me throw some numbers out here for you. They have 5 players with no movement clauses.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Parise, he's 31.
6 players with no movement clauses. 6, because
oh, that's right, Dubnyk as well, and actually Backstrom, but include skaters wise.
Okay.
I believe it's 5. Zach Parise signed until 2021-22. I can't even say that number. It's so far away.
Suter also.
$7.5 million. Same thing as Suter. Same contract. You have Mikko Koivu, who's certainly starting to hit the skids. He's
Leading the team in points,
6.75.
though.
Yes, but I mean, he's certainly not quite where he was. Thomas Vanek, 32 years old, 6.5 for this year and next year. And then Jason Pominville, who's 33 right now,
And
has 3 more years at $5.6 million. The hard thing here is all of this money locked up in these players. They're all getting older. Sure, Suter is still one of the best defensemen in the league. Zach Parise is still excellent. But at some point, these guys are going to fall off a little bit too, and they're the longest one out of all of them.
Yeah.
Those two, they're in big trouble because they can't move any of these guys unless they decide to waive their no movement clause. And the problem with bringing a guy like Parise and Suter in is you bring them home, they're not going to want to leave.
Yeah.
Why leave at this point? You're making your money. You're where you want to be in your home state.
And you have a no-move clause.
Yeah, and they're signed for another half of a decade.
And it's amazing because you don't ever think about that when they actually sign the deal, right? Everyone just commends them for coming home and doing that. But if everything goes to hell, there they are. They're still there, stuck. $15 million of do the math. 15 over out of the 70 some odd $1 million that they're going to be owed there. So, that's an albatross it's going to be for them. And it's going to be hard to combat that. And this, like we've kind of alluded to, the window to win is now. And that's why the pressure was on Yo. So, I mean, that's why the pressure was on him last year, was because they were in it. Last year was kind of the perceived next step where they were supposed to get over the Blackhawks and couldn't. Even after everything that went right for them, where they, Dubnyk saved their season, and then they stole the playoff round against St. Louis, and it was almost as if it was, and then they faced the Blackhawks, and they did it. That's what happened. So I mean, a lot of teams have been bitten by it. You see Nashville get bit by it last year a little bit, where they've kind of regressed a little bit, and Minnesota also, but. Man, you just wonder when one of these teams that's not Chicago and LA are going to take a step up in the West and challenge those guys, because I guess the Ducks are the only team left that have they put forth a couple of good efforts and have tried, but between those three, I mean, the Western Conference is basically been, it's basically been a monopoly.
Yeah.
Yeah, or two. Yeah, so and you wouldn't be stunned to see it happen again, where it's Chicago and LA or Chicago and Anaheim. I don't think Anaheim can get past LA in a 7-game series, but
that'd be the least surprising thing in the NHL this season if it's Chicago and LA in the Western Conference.
And you know what? Sign me up. Make it best of 15, because those games are awesome all the time. Maybe play it for the cup. Play them best of 7 and then have it for the cup. I mean, unless we want to get Washington. But but getting back to Minnesota here a little bit, it's just you almost have to think that they're gonna have an exhaustive coaching search here. But who? And I know there's gonna be some guys that are either going to be fired, or some of the guys who already have been fired. I mean, I don't know if Todd Richards is going to land on his feet again after the whole fiasco in Columbus, or certainly not. The guy in Pittsburgh who was fired, whose name is blank, Mike Johnston. I don't expect to see him anytime soon. But John Torchetti's been an interim coach before. You just wonder if this is his chance now. But there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that Stadium Series game Sunday, with a chance of rain and cold and snow, and it's not even going to be that cold supposedly. If you look at the forecast, it's supposed to be in the 30s. Which for Minnesota this time of the year isn't that cold. Chance of rain, actually, and we'll see. Maybe this coaching fire, it's done it for the other or the other couple squads. I mean, you saw Pittsburgh, kind of take off after Mike Sullivan was replaced, and Columbus is playing much better under John Tortorella. For better or for worse or whatever, but we'll see if they finally use the bullet with Yo, and I think Yo is going to land on his feet. What do you think?
I do. I think he could get a job again. I think this was just a situation where the pressure was very high, and I think that they had almost unreal expectations. I think if you look at this team and what they're really made of, and the fact that they put a lot of money, I kind of look at Ryan Suter and Zach Parise as not so much the issue here because they are probably the two best players on the team. I look at this more and say with Vanek and Pominville that those are the big contracts that you bring in. You know, the guys who have to be your number 2 and your number 3 scorers probably, and they're just not getting it done with this near the regularity that they need from them. And no, to me, I think with Yo, sure, maybe he could have done things differently. Maybe a new coach will spark them. But how much is that the players just being more motivated than it is the coaching happening?
They won the debut. It was their first win since January 9th in 5 weeks, basically. But, I agree with you there. That I think
he'll be okay.
I think he'll be okay, too. He's got backing from a lot of guys around the league. You know, I read quotes from Dan Bilesma about, just unfortunate circumstance. Yo was with him in Pittsburgh, I guess. So we'll see. I think he'll land on his feet. I think you see it happen with Bilesma. You see it happen with McClellan and from San Jose to Edmonton, and I think Mike Yo will be fine at some point. You almost might see if Winnipeg comes calling for him there, based on proximity and perception. Also, it seems
that was my one thought of where he could end up is Winnipeg.
Yeah.
What about here's the one that was very 2,000-1. Mike Yo to Montreal. that would be the most insane thing I think I've ever seen.
I don't think he speaks French, but either way, we go to Montreal. We'll nice little segue there. We'll expand to Montreal, and speaking with some people, they're actually referencing Austin Matthews up there in Montreal a little bit, and we found out last week that Carey Price won't be back. And, with that, we saw some of the moves. We saw Toronto offload Dion Phaneuf, and we saw what's happened since offloading Dion Phaneuf. And Dave, you look at how Columbus has rebounded here, and you wonder just, in light of what's going on here, what these teams are thinking, because they have this, other world, generational talent, if you will. That's the phrase that's being used to describe Austin Matthews, and it looks like Toronto is going to be the front runner to get him.
I don't know if you can call them the front runner as long as Edmonton is in the lottery.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think they're doing everything right. I don't hate tanking in a league that doesn't have a protected number 1 draft pick, because you're tanking knowing that you might not get the guy you want. You might not even get that close to the guy you want.
Yeah, this year.
Look at Arizona. They missed out. Sure, they might have found a good player of their own, but they missed out on the top 2 picks.
Did you hear the comments, by the way, from the GM of
yes,
Don
which
Malone?
is also I'm getting all these natural segues today. Yeah.
Where they basically if you missed it, he basically alluded to the fact in an article in a interview with Sports Illustrated's Alex Pruitt, who's one of the better guys in the around the league. Don Maloney said that basically that the team tanked last year to try and get in the McDavid Eichel running, and I guess they got their comeuppance by not landing in the top 2, but they still got a heck of a good player in Dylan Strome. But it's really more that they didn't build to win last year. That how I perceived it was that they did not, obviously were not in a position to win last year, and they did not do anything to try to win last year. And they offloaded some pieces. They got some great prospects, back from, that's why Anthony Duclair's there, is because they traded Keith Yandel, and they got a great prospect in I think it was the Zbynek Mahalik trade, and then they got it, or I forget which one. Let me look it up, and then I'll get back to you on that one. But it might have actually been the Vermette trade, but they basically went out, and it's no different than a team that say in hypothetical, baseball, for instance, that trade some of its better talent to stock up on, or let its younger players play a little bit and get some draft picks and rebuild for the next year. Because I don't know why the perception is that it was tanking when it was basically just building more towards the future. But that's what came out yesterday. So that's how it was perceived by some. And so that's the fact that Vermette came back, basically was Klaus Dahlbeck was the guy.
Yes.
Was the big prospect from Chicago they got in the Vermette deal, and Vermette brought a cup to Chicago partially. So the Coyotes are better for the moves they made last year. They're better this year. They didn't expect to be better this year, but they are. They're right in the thick of the playoff race, still in it. Despite the fact, with some direction, with some young talent, with some improvement, and that's I didn't perceive it as tanking. It was more rebuilding, but I feel bad for Mark Arcobello, who basically is on all these tanking teams. He was on Arizona last year, and now he's in Toronto again.
Yeah, I'm never going to hate on a team for tanking. And here's why. This is a business, whether we like to admit that it is or not, and we talk about it, and we certainly love the game. It's a business, and you have to make tough decisions in your business. That's no different than a company deciding they need to close a plant or something because just money or whatever. I mean, teams have to make financial decisions, and the idea is to get competitive to make money. And if the best way to do that is to get a generationally good player in there, I'm not going to hate on that because I mean, clearly, we see that free agency doesn't exactly translate necessarily to helping teams. Sure, if you're a team that's really, really close, maybe bringing in a guy helps. I mean, Paul Stastny to the Blues. Remember when we thought he was going to be the tipping point for St. Louis?
Put them over the top,
Yeah, that hasn't been the case. So I think that, especially when you look at how free agency is as a whole, I think that you have, as a team, you have every right to do what you want to help your team. I'm not going to hate on it. I know there's people who think that tanking is bad because, especially, God forbid, let's just say Minnesota happens to play Toronto at the end of the year, and Minnesota is a point out of a playoff spot, and you're a Colorado Avalanche fan, and you're rooting for Minnesota to lose, and Toronto goes out there and starts basically an AHL plus team, and because of that, they make the playoffs. Sure, you're going to be mad, but at the end of the day, I think these teams have the right to do what they want to better themselves.
Sure. Plus, it's obviously the team whose destiny is not in control's fault for losing a point, blowing a point here. I mean, every team can bellyache about those things, but they also could have taken care of their own business. And I just talk to a lot of people, and whether you want to call it tanking, whether you want to call it rebuilding, whether you want to stockpiling assets or whatever. I mean, look at what the Coyotes did. They're a better team this year because they got and they're going to be a better team down the road because they were worse last year. Say what you want about Dylan Strome. He led the Ontario Hockey League in points last year. So he's a pretty good talent to fall to number 3 overall, whether they were in it or not. I mean, you almost have to give them low marks for not doing it again this year because Matthews is actually from Scottsdale. That talk about marketable kids. Mm-hmm. Out there when they could be moving into a new building in Scottsdale down the road. But they're in a playoff hunt and good for them. And that we'll see what happens with them down the road. But I'd rather be where Arizona is than where Vancouver is, where they're just kidding themselves, talking about going for a playoff push when they're 6 points out and they're not a very good team and their row is the worst. It's tied for the worst in the Western Conference. Is the second worst in the entire sport. How are they going to win a tiebreaker with 18 when they've won 18 out of 56 games in regulation and overtime? I mean, but that's beside the point. I'd rather be Arizona, in a position to win down the road with bright young stars, with marketable stars. Domi is a great player, and Duclair, they got him for Yandel. Yandel, what was he doing out there that was really helping them at that point? And they got max value for him, and it worked out. Now you look at the Rangers talking about trading him so that they can get the max value for him instead of letting him walk in free agency. So, whether, like I said, tanking, rebuilding, at this time of the season, the teams that know they aren't going anywhere. I mean, Columbus knows it's not a playoff team. if Toronto did the right way, Buffalo probably has to think it's and we could segue right into what we're going to talk about, which is the trade deadline. And one team I'd say which actually did the right thing, was re-signing Dustin Byfuglien, was Winnipeg. But now we have some rumors about whether Jacob Trouba is going to go. Jacob Trouba, who, by the way, as of this recording, is still only 21 years of age. Young defenseman with all the skill and all this youth and growth. And I don't know why teams want to trade 21-year-old defensemen, but I'm not a manager. But
last time I checked, they don't grow on trees.
Yeah, they don't. And but Winnipeg was the beneficiary of that last year with the whole Tyler Myers thing. So I don't know, but either way, Dave, is there? I mean, you look at, we watched Byfuglien leave the board, and we talked about Yandle and Andrew Ladd's obviously the hot piece. I don't love what he does to help a team as a rental, especially given what I've seen as the potential asking price. But is there a player that you've seen that maybe somebody should be ponying up for in the rental market?
There's one that I know we've talked about this before, but I think it still becomes a very polarizing situation. I know Carolina is struggling with attendance. Yeah. I know that they've been much better, and they might not even be out of it. They certainly could be very well in it. They could be buyers for all we know.
Yeah.
If we get, a couple weeks down the road here to the trade deadline, and they're certainly not in it, and they know that, look, it's not their year anyway. I think if they could get a major haul for Eric Staal, I know it looks bad. I know it's an issue. But if you look at what this team is doing with some young pieces already, that if they can just continue the influx of young talent into this team, I think they're better off. Yeah. I know it's a really tough pill to swallow because it's more than just on-ice stuff with him. But I think that if you could bring Eric – and look, Eric Staal's not a top 10, top 15 player anymore as he was a few years ago. No, he's certainly not that. Could he help a lot of teams? Absolutely. I mean, you talk about, Pat, our mantra is always you got to be big down the middle, especially out west, to compete. Eric Staal would help that. I think that they have to look at it not so much about that they're worried about the fan base or what it shows, but I think more of this is the deal we want, and if we can get this deal, even if it's really high, this is what we're going to do it for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's a forward. He's only 31 years old, and maybe we could transition from trade deadline also into the big news from Monday about Steven Stamkos is not being traded. You've alluded to the fact you like Tampa maybe going out and making that controversial trade and getting some assets for him. I tend to like keeping him because we've talked about it, and Tampa's right there on the cusp of they're in the 8th spot right now. We're tied for the 8th spot, but they're right there on the cusp. They're one of those teams that are trending upward, and I would really love to see them hang on to him, make a cup run, and then try to sign him. But and I think they can. But that's that remains to be seen. Dave, what's your thoughts on Steve Yzerman's comments that came out, the statement he made?
I think he's done almost everything right since he's been there. I think that he wanted to ease his team. I think that he didn't want to deal with 2 weeks of the fervor of this getting crazier and crazier because it distracts from the product on the ice. And they're in a dogfight right now. They need every game they can get. And I think that if you let this go 2 more weeks, it's going to have an effect on them. The team and look, coaching staff, they don't want to answer questions about this, especially if it wasn't going to happen. And even if it was, I mean, why do they need to constantly be bombarded by questions about the impending deal or the deal that isn't right now? Yep. I think it's really smart. It's calculated. Who knows? Maybe they are even going to trade him, but at least it allows them to not have
the questions
right now, which is important. If you
when you look at
pressure off, that's great.
Yeah, you saw our buddy Frank Cervelli wrote a story about for TSN about Stamkos' trip wandering around Montreal, and he was being followed by a guy with a camera, and basically about that whole thing where Stamkos caught him his follower following him, and basically about how that's like the fishbowl of Montreal, and would he welcome the trade to a place like that, or to obviously, and then down the road potentially Toronto. We've all kind of speculated that could be the landing spot. That may not be the case based on some things you read, but it's interesting because I agree with you. This is a calculated move. It's smart. It keeps the pressure off. It allows them to negotiate one, but also potentially negotiate a deal. Like you said, if there's the prospect of one, if somebody comes out of the woodworks in the next 2 weeks, they'll say, well, I know you said you weren't going to trade him, but and that's just it allows the keep the media speculation off it. I didn't think they were going to do it in the first place, but because I really think they believe they can sign him. I really think he likes it there, and what's not to like about playing in Tampa Bay? If the area, the weather's beautiful, there's good fans, but it's not rabid. It's not it's not like a fishbowl, and I mean I think it's perfect for him, but. That remains for him and his agencies and whatnot. So I like the decision from Tampa Bay to do that, and at least announce it publicly that they won't trade him and then try to sign him because, let's face it, he's the best player the team's ever had. And, you don't want to just – I mean, I know they did it with Marty St. Louis a couple of years ago, and that, whatever happened there, it worked out actually pretty much ended up working out because, the old NFL thing where – you gave up on a player, maybe 4 months too early instead of a year too late with him. So, and they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals last year, so you can't really complain too much about that. So, like the move, like the idea of signing him, I think I would, but that's all I'll say about Stamkos. Yeah. So, Dave, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Toronto is really interesting now because I don't think there's a single person on that roster that couldn't be had for the right price. I mean, it is Lou. And we know that he'll certainly try to swindle someone. Roman Polak could certainly move for a team that needs blue line help. A guy who I think could be a nice fit for a team looking to either deal with an injury to their top six or even just kind of give themselves a bona fide third scoring line would be P.A. Parento. He's had some good stretches in his career. I know he hasn't exactly been lights out this year, but I mean,
he's one of those frustrating players who's got great skill who just can't stay out of his coach's doghouse, whether it was Patrick Waugh or Mike Terrian but yeah, I agree with you. He was great, especially with John Tavares there. And maybe that would make a little sense there. Although everybody's really good with John Tavares.
Yeah, it's hard not to be good with John Tavares.
Pretty much, but yeah. So Dave, I know we talked about the outdoor game Sunday in Minnesota. A lot of looking forward to that. What do you think about, or is there anything else you're looking forward to in the week ahead?
I have to take a look at the schedule. I haven't gotten past this week.
Well, then I'll start. I'll say Tampa Bay at Pittsburgh Saturday. I already mentioned that the two teams are tied for the 8th spot as of this recording. A lot of skill in the game. Stamkos, Crosby, Kessel, Hedman, the triplets. That's including if Evgeny Malkin's not able to play, which he appears he's getting closer. Tampa Bay has, those two previous games have been high scoring. Tampa Bay's outscored Pittsburgh 11-7 in the two previous meetings. Tampa Bay's, coming on here. Like I said, trending upward, and that's going to be a fun game. 12:30 Eastern, 9:30. Imagine waking up to that game in the West Coast where you're Tampa at Washington. I'm sorry, Tampa at Pittsburgh, 9:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. But that's the one I'm looking forward to. What about you?
There's the one to me. I'm going to go with another Tampa Bay game. So on Sunday, Tampa Bay turns around and they play Carolina. They might be a little tired. I know they are doing the whole day game, night game thing, so they'll have a little extra time.
Yep.
But they are away for both of these, so they do have to travel. I think that's a really crucial for a 2-day stretch for Tampa Bay, especially because Carolina has been better. They are looking to get themselves back in it. If Carolina is going to make a move here, it's going to be because they pass a team like Tampa. I think that's a really big game. That could be either the end of Carolina or it could be the beginning of the end of Tampa Bay. Because look, there's not that many games left to play here, and I think that when you get into a position, especially with the extra point, it's really hard to make up ground. I think at the very least, if you can cut it to 2 points and stay within 2 points down the stretch, anything can happen. And to me, that's a game that could really define both these teams. It's amazing we're talking about Carolina here still, but I really like what I've seen from them. They play really good, disciplined hockey. I think that should be a fun one.
But probably looks like there's going to be plenty of good seats available for that one too. So if you're,
come on, you had to go there.
Where
there won't be seats though is in Minnesota for the outdoor game. I have to point out though, I'm a big fan of the Minnesota color scheme. I've actually written articles before. I think their normal green alternate is the best sweater in the league. What the hell are they doing with those uniforms? My God. I mean, you talk about old school hockey. I mean, generations growing up playing on the ponds. And then, you have a great third sweater as it is anyway. And then you go with this generic green with a white panel on the top, no old school coloring to it or anything. That just kind of made me mad just because I was really looking forward to seeing them take the ice out there in some really cool threads, and it was far from it.
The Blackhawks isn't great either, but we got into
they ran out of ideas, right?
We got into that one already last year about. I actually kind of like the Minnesota one, but we'll reserve judgment on those for another day.
Yes, we're in the home stretch here. We'll have a trade deadline show coming up. Pat, it's going to get really fast and furious here in a couple weeks. I can't wait. I'm in the throngs of basketball season producing games too, so I can barely come up for air other than to watch a couple hockey games at night. So it's going to be fun getting to the home stretch here. Sure.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm going to be at Rangers Blackhawks Wednesday night.
Ah, that's a real good one.
Yeah, rivalry night. So let's do that.
I don't know about sometimes rivalry night things really confuse me, but we've been over that one too.
Yep.
So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. We'll catch you soon. Cool.
Not bad, short and sweet, right? What is it, like 40 minutes?
I don't think it was probably 40, 45 minutes.
Yeah, not bad. All right.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to post this tonight, so it'll be up tomorrow because I think Wednesday is the best day anyway, personally.
Okay. All right.
Just because there's usually not as many games midweek, so
Wednesdays there's usually the fewest just because of TV windows and stuff.
Yeah.
All right,
cool. Do you want to try to do a deadline show?
I would. I got to see what my schedule is going to be like. But,
wait, what exact day is it? The 29th?
It's the 29th. Yeah.
Okay, I am off that day as of.
That's Monday.
Yes. Okay. Oh wait, no, shit. I have to. Never mind. I'm gonna be in Boston that day. I have to go up for court for the accident.
Damn. All right. Well, we'll do something around that.
Either that, or we could do something that night to do for the next day. Because honestly, especially if not that much is going to happen, because I don't know if there is, it's almost better to talk about.
Yeah.
The minute that the window closes, all of a sudden it's everyone's locked in. Here we go, playoff push. So I think it almost makes for a better show because instead of waiting for something to happen, you can react to it and say, "Well, this team made a move. Yada yada. Who's going to make the playoffs now?"
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. All right.
We can talk more about it down the road, but yeah.
All right.
See you, bud.
Talk to you soon.